Okay, so we are doing our last set of notes for the year for 2020. This is it, last set of notes. The end of the serial killer notes. So here we go. So we left off at how to tell the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. Okay, so most serial killers fall into one of those two categories, either a sociopath or a psychopath. Not always, but usually. So usually one of those categories. Oh. I don't know why it chooses to extend like this, but well. So it involves impaired thinking and emotions. If you have one of those types of psychosis, the individual is not in touch with reality, maybe experiencing delusions or hallucinations. So these are different types of psychosis that they could have. The onset of psychosis is usually in young adulthood, so usually actually around y'all's age. So around 15 to 18 is when the psychosis starts to set in. What can psychosis cause, or what can cause it? Genetic predisposition, so it's just runs in the family. Drug use, for sure. They didn't tell you that drugs cause brain injuries for no reason. It's because it does. It definitely can affect your brain, especially depending on the type of drug. Can eat away at different parts, make different parts not function as well. It depends on which drug as to how it affects your brain. And then untreated syphilis. So there's types of diseases that affect your brain. Syphilis is one of those. A brain tumor. There's actually been a serial killer that he just had a tumor. He was a perfectly normal human being, got a tumor in his brain, and it completely altered his personality. And insomnia, actually just being super, super, super tired can mess you up. Certainly can, depending on how tired you get. So psychological reasons, again, we have psychopaths and sociopaths. So most of the time our serial killers are going to fall into one of these two categories. We have some shared traits first. So both psychopaths and sociopaths are classified under an antisocial personality disorder. So that they're both considered an antisocial personality disorder. Those are unreversible. So it's not something that you'll like outgrow or something like that. It is something you live with, not something you can take medication for. It's something that you can learn to cope with, go to therapy. Like it's not like a sentence of like, oh, I have to be a serial killer because I have this trait. No. But usually serial killers do have these traits. So violent tendencies. So both have violent tendencies. Laws and social norms are not obeyed, and lack of remorse or feelings of guilt. So you do something and you just can't feel bad about it, even though it, by all standards of morality and social norms, you should feel bad about it. All right, so now just a sociopath. So a sociopath only, they tend to be angered easily. They typically do not maintain a stable job or residence, means where you live. Although difficult, there may be some relationship with another person or group. So these ones might actually feel like they have a connection with someone or a group of someone's. Okay, so not like a lot of times they say like, oh, they can't really love someone. Sometimes they do, but it's usually one. Okay, so like they love this person, that's it. They're the only person they care about in the whole world. Or it's like a cult, so like loving this group. If a sociopath commits a crime, it'll be more spontaneous and less calculated, generally. The condition is usually a result of trauma, abuse, brain damage, and other environmental factors like drugs. So generally, a sociopath is more created by these things that happen to their brain. So maybe they wouldn't have acted like this. Maybe they would have had empathy and they would have felt guilt as a child. But after the trauma, after the abuse, after the brain damage, whatever happened to them that they suffered, they may no longer have that empathy. Like it just messed up that part of their brain. For a psychopath, they are highly manipulative, can mimic other people's emotions, so tend to blend in better. A sociopath usually kind of sticks out because they just seem off and angry. A psychopath tends to be able to blend it, tends to be able to hide it, to gain your trust. They tend to be more educated. They tend to have stable employment. So these are the harder ones to catch because generally they blend into society. Never form an authentic relationship though. So they do not care about someone really. They might be married. They might have a family, but their actual relationship with that person is not going to be authentic. Whereas a sociopath might truly have someone they really love with another person or a group, even if they do have a family. So they might have a family, but that doesn't mean that they care about them the same way. If a psychopath commits a crime, it will usually be well planned with backup plans in case something goes wrong. So they're going to be methodical about it. This condition is usually a result of genetic traits. So this one is more so along the lines of like they were born with their brain being like that. So they didn't need the trauma as much. They didn't need a brain damage. They didn't need to fall on their head or something like that. They just were like that. Their brain had that psychopathic tendency that we saw in the warm-up video yesterday. So just kind of a chart to break it down. So 4% of the general population, they think are sociopaths, and about 1% of the population they think are psychopaths. Again, you don't have to be a serial killer if you're a psychopath or a sociopath. Certainly don't. There are certainly people that are those things and do not commit any violent acts. Usually there's more involved. So usually they have those psychopathic tendencies, and they had the abuse as a child, and they have the warrior gene, and then they get triggered. Okay, so like something occurs in their like mid-20s that makes them go like, whoop, and they just start killing people. A lot of them have a turning point. NGRI is something that is a vocab term you'll need to know. So NGRI means not guilty by reason of insanity. So we've talked about that before. That's just another thing about this unit. So we're learning about psychology. And one of the bigger things with forensic psychology is to determine if the criminal we have on trial should stand trial, or if they should be not guilty by reason of insanity. Not many people get NGRI. But if you can prove that they really were insane, then perhaps they are not guilty. That doesn't mean that they're like set them free because they're not guilty. But it's just it's a different level. Whereas they're probably not going to get the death penalty because they didn't understand what they were doing is wrong. So insane is a legal term, not a medical diagnosis. So we've saying like they're insane. It's actually supposed to be a legal term, meaning you were so insane that you didn't understand what you were doing was wrong. That's what insane actually means. We just kind of use it flippantly now, but that's what it's supposed to mean. A forensic psychologist may serve as an expert in court to determine if the defendant is NGRI. If the defendant is NGRI, it means they have committed the crime offense. However, they lacked the ability to think rationally. They couldn't control their emotions or their impulses and displayed a diminished capacity of just understanding what they did at all. In some states, a plea of NGRI would require the defendant to be committed to a mental health facility or rehabilitation. So they will go somewhere. It's not like they're just like set free if they murdered someone, but they may not get the death penalty in an actual prison. Now we have organized versus disorganized killers. So this was what our first movie was about on Monday. You saw the two examples. The disorganized killer was the first one. That was the vampire of Sacramento. Okay. And the way that he killed was random. He killed people just near his house. Like it was not calculated, was not planned. He wasn't trying to not get caught because he was not thinking of anything other than he was so schizophrenic at that point that he was having delusions that he had to drink blood or he was going to die. So very delusional, having that psychopathic tendency for sure, and would just break into people's homes and kill them. Like, I mean, that's just, there wasn't a plan. He left the weapons inside. He didn't cover it up. And generally, they have a lower intelligence. Not always, but usually it's a little lower than average. The victims are random. A lot of times they can be prostitutes because those are just, it's easy to get a prostitute into a to get them alone. Unable work history. So like they don't generally keep the same jobs. They're usually antisocial. They usually do not keep up with a family. They don't have the ability to hold on to things like that. Seen as weird or creepy, just because usually they're having some kind of psychosis. Rituals with the body might be, so he did some weird things with their bodies. Leaves body where it is. So the bodies were all left out in plain sight. He killed them and left them there. Trophies are often body parts. He did take body parts with him. Body mutilation did. They tend to be angrier and just kind of hacking at people. Lack of preparation. There was no planning. He just walked in, found whatever knives they had in their kitchen. Then violence is sudden. I mean, we can't prove that, but he probably was just wigged out and went and killed someone. Often they were severely disturbed. Okay, so that's our disorganized killers. For our organized killers, these are the ones that we more think of like the, I guess more, I hate saying famous because we should not idolize them at all, but famous serial killers like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, that kind of stuff, people who get away with it longer. So higher intelligence, they lure their victims in. Okay, so they're not just running into someone's home, they're luring their victims. They're thinking of ways to lure their victims. They have a stable work history. They might live with a family, a girlfriend, something like that. Maybe charming, hides the body, cleans up afterwards. So they're cleaning up their mess. They're trying to get away with it. They may have a kill kit in hand. So they have it planned out. They have a thought out kill kit. The trophies are things like a wallet, jewelry, clothing. They're keeping trinkets that they can keep for a longer period of time. Continual refinement of fantasy. So they're acting out their full planning fantasy. Improvement of details from one crime to the next. So it's not that they'll never change what they do. It's just usually if they do change it, it's because they are changing their fantasy, changing a way to do it better to them. So planning of crime and disposal of the body, they're usually very socially competent, so they can blend in, and they do usually follow their crimes and enjoy that kind of recognition. Now, for motives of serial killers, there are 4 general categories, but lots of overlap in between. So sometimes they have more than these, or like have all 4, things like that. So a visionary means they have a psychotic break with reality. They just like snap. Mission oriented, getting rid of a certain type of person. So some of them do have a loathing of a type of person and can keep targeting that type. Hedonistic, which means derives pleasure. So that is a lot of the ones we think of as being the more famous killers. Lust, thrill, or material gain. So they're getting something out of it. And then power and control. Most of them have that, is that for whatever reason, their emotional part in their brain just does not understand that dominating another human being is wrong, that it hurts their rights. And they enjoy that kind of domination, which is a psychopathic tendency. Now for MO, that's another vocab term you're going to need to know. So an MO just means is the way the killer finds the victim, overpowers the victim, kills the victim without getting caught. So like, what do they generally do? That's their MO. Or their modus operandi. May change over time as the killer refines his method. So it's just, how do they normally lure their victims? How do they normally get their victim down? How do they normally kill their victim? How do they normally hide the body? Like that kind of thing would be their MO. Whereas a signature, they sound really similar, but a signature is something that's going to make that serial killer stand apart from other killers. So something different, something that tweaks them. So like BTK. BTK would leave his signature there. He binded, he tortured, he killed them. So it's like, that's a little different than like you just stabbing someone, which is still awful. But some of the serial killers, like they just killed them. There wasn't much more signature to it. Some of them have like a ritual as the way that they do it, and that would be more signature. So something really specific about how the killer posed the bodies, concealed the victims, left specific objects. Maybe they sent messages to the police, like that kind of thing that makes them stand apart. You think of them in a different category. Gives a clue about what he considers as important to him. Does not change substantially over time. Usually that signature is the signature. That's why it's a signature. Not always present, but so like it's saying not all serial killers have one. Now for profiling, that's what we're supposed to be learning how to do. It's how to profile a serial killer. Profiling is how the law enforcement agencies track a serial killer by documenting his methods. Because again, it's hard. We have these people that don't really seem to have much of a motive. So tracking them, finding their evidence, much more complicated. We're going to gather all available data, organize it to predict the type of killer, the motive, if they have any whatsoever, reconstruct behavior of the killer and the victim, formulate initial description, give to investigators, concentrate on the suspects who match the profile. That has worked. Like they've made a criminal profile. It fit someone with just any kind of prior that kind of fit. They would put those people on surveillance, follow them around for a while, and catch them in the act. So like this is sometimes the only way we have to catch a serial killer is to criminally profile them. Now, these are just some things that we've noticed in most profiles of these serial killers. Is the role of fantasy. So 82% of serial killers report daydreaming in their childhood, accompanied by, I don't want to read that. Okay. If fantasies are violent, violence with sex becomes associated with one another. So again, a lot of our serial killers have some kind of sexual motive. It's not that they all rape their victims, thank goodness, but there is some kind of excitement about it in that way, which is just it's the fact that the front part of their brain and the middle part of their brain are not balanced, as in most normal brains are. So telling the difference between enjoying sex in a natural, normal way without murdering them is not balanced. as it should be in a person's normal brain. 71% report feeling isolated as children. Isolation encourages substitution of fantasy for human contact. So a lot of them were left alone a lot as children. And then test runs. Most of our serial killers had test runs. It took them a while before their initial kill. So this can help you track back, find anyone who has a prior that's kind of like the murder, like it's getting close, but they didn't really do it. Maybe a prostitute that was, she did go to the police because she was kidnapped. She was tied up. They tried to hurt her, but she got away. Or maybe they even released her. Sometimes that happens. And then their test runs, they release them. So then if you go back and you're like, wait, what was that case where that one girl came in, said she was assaulted, but got away? And maybe that person after stopped letting them get away. So serial killers start by giving it a test run, involves cruelty to animals, small children. Sometimes they have those in their priors when that's maybe not their target, but that's just, they're more vulnerable. They're easier to get to. Stealing women's underwear, exhibitionism means like showing off your body in public. Burglary and other minor offenses. So starting off with these smaller crimes you might have on record before they start getting better about covering their tracks. A theory. So there's a theory about a lot of our serial killers. 66% of the sexual and serial killers report their mother as their dominant parent. So most of them don't have a father in the home. And most of the time that mother is very dominant. The boys cannot achieve their masculinity because of their mom being so domineering. So most of them have a very tense relationship with their single parent mother. And a lot of times they have a very low opinion of their mother. So get that, especially the ones that attack women. So the serial killers that attack women generally have a very low opinion of a woman based on their very poor relationship with their mother. That's been true in many, many serial killer cases. Rage focused on females. Now deciphering a crime scene. So we're almost done. We're going to talk about just a couple of things. You could look at a crime scene and kind of start to build a profile of what you think your criminal's like if they act like this, okay? So a blitz style attack, that means they attack they come in really fast and just like stabbing with a knife. Like it's just fast, it's over, okay? A blitz style attack on a small or physically challenged person. So that could be a child, that could be an old person, could be a disabled person. Means attacker has little confidence and self-esteem. They're not charming. They're probably not very good at being social. They're probably not blending into society because of that lack of confidence. And that's why they're choosing that kind of victim. Sexual attacks on the elderly mean the person has little or no sexual experience. Again, that level of confidence, you're looking for someone who, in that case, again, is probably not blending in. They're not going for the person that they think is most attractive or anything like that. They are just going for what they think is an easier target because they are too afraid to go for maybe the target that they wanted to go for. A little bit more about deciphering crime scenes. Severe face trauma, covering the face. Maybe they cover the face before they go. Means the person may have known the victim or is trying to depersonalize them. Not always a her. So depersonalize them to making them it could show a little bit of guilt if they're covering the body. So covering the entire body means the person feels bad about what they did, possibly. So that could be telling you that this might be an actual important person or a more important person or someone that they knew. Maybe they didn't feel guilty about it, but they knew they weren't supposed to do it. So they covered the body. Multiple stab wounds means a lot of anger and emotion. Think about 30 stab wounds, so that's a lot. So you're thinking a lot more anger, a lot more sociopathic, a lot less control of their actions. So we're just going to go through an example of how to look at a case and give a criminal profile of them, okay? So this is Jack the Ripper. Most of us know him. He was not caught, so you can't do him for your serial killer project because you can only do ones that we know of. So you can actually know the end result. You can actually finish the project. If we don't know who they were, then you can't really finish the project. So the first modern day serial killer, he's the first one that we know about that's in modern day time. So he's not back with the castles. He's in more modern day time. 1888, Whitechapel, London. That's where it was at. He had 5 victims in 3 months. Killing stopped suddenly. His identity is unknown. Jack the Ripper's victims, so Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and lastly, Mary Kelly, who was way more messed up. So you know what? I'm just going to have to click through these because the bell just rang. So we have the letters. The mutilation of body suggests sexually inadequate person with a rage against women. Okay, because he's picking on women. The blitz style attack that he just got him and quickly attacked him suggests someone who's socially inadequate. He was hiding. He's in the shadows. Someone who could blend into surroundings. He's a loner, disorganized offender. So he's not planned. It kind of just seems that he was, if you think about his targets, they were all prostitutes. Okay, so they were easy people to get alone in an alley, or Mary Kelly was in her home. So very disorganized, probably could blend enough that people weren't looking at him, but definitely has a lot of aggression and rage towards women, and probably doesn't feel sexually adequate because he's attacking prostitutes. He's not going after a woman that like he's really into over here. He's just getting a woman that is easy to get over off to an alleyway by themselves. Okay, so that's kind of the profile. I'll post this notes if you want to read the other profiles, but I'm out of time. Bell rang, so gotta quit notes.